Welcome back, Honors.
Hello, big boy.
Anyway, so we left off talking in class on Friday about barbarian tribes, just kind of how they were more misunderstood than anything else, right? Because you got to think about the barbarians of Europe a lot like you would think of the Native Americans of the United States. The reason why we see such a standout in their culture has a lot to do with the fact that the interactions between modern Europeans and technologically advanced Europeans with a primitive society is much more of a drastic shift. Whereas when we look at Europe during the, 500s to 800s AD, we don't see in our mind, we still see bustling cities and people wearing like bowler hats and speaking in English accents, Crumpton. Anyway, but you have to understand they're much like the Native Americans in their own. What do you want? Anyway, so much like the Native Americans in their own respect. So, because barbarians created money, they had governments, and they settled all of Europe and the origins of its modern-day people. All of you have barbarian blood in you. I'm going to skip that thing. But here we go. So tomorrow you're going to get a map. You're going to get a map for your map quiz that we're going to have before Christmas break. And these are just four examples of like some solid barbarian tribes that settled most of Europe. And they're all considered the Germanic peoples, okay? So when we think about them, we go Ostrogoths. Ostrogoths are the ones who sacked Rome and actually like colonized all of Italy. Then we got the Visigoths. They're the ones who colonized modern-day Spain and had some run-ins with the Muslims early on. We had the Anglo-Saxons who actually came from Denmark but then moved over to modern-day Britain and interbred with the Britons and made English people. And then the Franks, of course, who settled the Solomiddos. Now, anyway, so let's keep going. But barbarians, the big thing about them is they're going to begin to organize. Under organize, put consolidate, all right? CONSOLDIDATE, consolidate, all right? So consolidate in the terms of they began to elect central leaders, well, not elect, but appoint central leaders. Usually those were the guys that led militaries. They were warlords of some type. They're going to eventually put in those hereditary leaders where are you going? Oh, he's got to go get some water. So they're going to put hereditary leaders in line, and they're going to actually make it so if a father dies, a son will take over. They're going to begin to make permanent settlements in Europe and create actual like key settlements, usually building off the infrastructure of what was left behind of Rome. Now, we're going to get to that when we talk about feudalism a little bit on Monday and talk about how like there was a lot of infrastructure left behind, so it didn't take a lot for them to consolidate these kingdoms. So they're going to begin to make permanent settlements, and even though they single-handedly destroyed all things of intelligence and value in the world that were produced at that point, they're going to try and make up for it, okay? So we'll keep going now. And really quickly, don't write anything down yet, but write this down first, okay? So the very, very first two families that are going to begin the consolidation of Europe are called the Merovingians, 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 all right? So the Merovingians, and then the next one over, jump over, is going to be the Carolingians, Carolingians, okay? Carolingians. Well, these two groups of people were very responsible for creating the modern-day countries of France and the modern-day countries of Germany. Well, Germany wasn't called Germany for a really long time. It was a much more larger, powerful empire, but we'll get there later, okay? But the guy who really started the Merovingian dynasty is this guy, Clovis, all right? Right here. You see his name right there? Clovis, okay? Put a star next to him, underline him, circle him a couple of times. Everyone, for some reason, forgets Clovis. I don't think he's, like, the best figure in the Middle Ages, but he is important, okay? So, as far as we know, we believe he was probably a Roman military leader in the outskirts of the empire. He established what was known as the Frankish kingdom in Central Europe. So, he conquered a lot of very small competing tribes and regional Roman political lands, and actually started bringing together a lot of the old patricians into his empire. But he made them noble families, right? So noble families as in they had a lot of pull and owned large amounts of land. I'm going to show you on Monday a picture of a Roman villa and how that was turned into a Middle Age fief. All right, anyway. Converted to Christianity because his wife made him. That's an interesting story I'll tell you in about 2 seconds. And also spread Christianity even further. So his biggest thing is he's consolidating people together into a working unit that you would imagine much like a country, right? But it's very rudimentary. It's considered much more of a kingdom with him at the very, very top. The thing about a kingdom is that the king doesn't have as much power as a noble does in theory and on paper. The only thing that they can really do is collect taxes and try to distribute them throughout the entire empire. But speaking of him converting to Christianity, he actually didn't want to. He was a pagan early on. He had all of his little gods and stuff like that. A lot of them like worshiped sun gods and things like that and had sacrifices and stuff. Well, his wife started seeing the spread of Christianity to the people of their new kingdom. And she is going to be the one that realizes, wait a minute, if he converts to Christianity, he'll have more sway over all of these people. So she goes up to him and she says, hey, convert to Christianity, you'll have more power this way, more influence, you'll be seen much more as like a patriarch or a leader of the church, right? He then responds with, nah, I'm good. I've got like, the water god and the sun god and all those cool ones. Why would I have one god when I could have like a bunch of them, right? Well, she says to him, fine, you want to play that way? You're going to die one day and your sons are going to take over. So I'm going to convert them to Christianity so they have more power. So she takes his eldest son to go get baptized. The baptismal water has an infectious disease in it. He contracts an infection and then dies. So now he's livid. He's like, what the heck? This like new religion killed my kid. And she's like, just give me another shot. And then she tries to baptize the other one, and then he almost dies. Well, eventually Clovis is going to convert to Christianity, be baptized just because of its political influence, right? So, considered the founder of modern-day France, or the father of France, conquered a huge area. He didn't really spread any intelligence or beef up anything, which sucks. But he also called, like his law that he created, Roman law. So really all he did was consolidate the first area before the Carolingians did. And his was this area, the Frankish kingdoms. This is about 768, about 200 years after the fall of Rome. He's going to begin consolidating all of this area, okay? So, then there's this guy, and he is the boss. He is the man, okay? He is Charlemagne, okay? Charlemagne, that's his name right there, not boss. His name is not boss, but he is the man. Also known as Charles the Great, powerful leader, very strong Christian leader. Created the Carolingian Empire out of what was left of the Roman Empire, okay? So he's going to take all the pieces of Roman infrastructure and he's going to group them all together to create a new large empire in the center of Europe, spread out past the Rhine, okay? So what you imagine Germany today. Charlemagne is the man. He had like 7 different wives. He like wouldn't let his daughters marry anybody because he knew they could possibly, these new married-in men could fight him for power and things like that. Sorry, he's just a really interesting figure. There's also a solid chance, like a 1 in like, I think it's like a 1 in 30 or 1 in 40 chance that you're related to him too because he had so many wives and so many kids. So Charlemagne though is going to be alive from 742 to 814. And he is going to be crowned by Pope Leo III at the time, the first Holy Roman Emperor. Now, this is another power move by the Catholic Church. This is actually, the Catholic Church is attempting to basically hold sway over this entire large empire. Because if they crown the king, then who did the authority come from? God, Pope, then to the king, right? So Pope Leo is going to give him the crown of Holy Roman Emperor, and he's going to be known as Charles the Great. He is known as the father of Europe. He united the barbarian tribes of Western Europe and brought around a lot of stability. And his dad's name was Pepin the Short, which is hilarious. All right, anyway, so Charlemagne also, under his reign, there's going to be this thing in the early Middle Ages called the Carolingian Renaissance. All right, so which means that people had stopped creating art and intelligence altogether before Charlemagne, but then when his family came in, due to the high prosperic times, people were going to begin to create art a little bit. Now, it sucked and it wasn't good, but like they tried. They were doing something, right? So Carolingian Renaissance. Write that down somewhere. So his dad's nickname was the Hammer because he like pounded these guys all the way out of what's it called, Spain. So he actually ended up conquering and taking over what Clovis had already consolidated, and then consolidated furthermore over here. So these two units are going to end up breaking apart from each other eventually due to war and power struggle. But the important thing is that they're actually coming together. Then we got the Vikings. All right, anyway, the Vikings are a warrior culture from Scandinavia. They're going to raid Europe repeatedly during this time. They're very important to understand who they are. Some of you are like, wait, I thought they were just some guys. No, they actually led to the most important part of history when it comes to European history, the establishment of feudalism. Their raids led people to group together on the plots of land and then work for a landowner for protection, and then people, speaking of protection, would organize militaries to protect those lands. So it created a system of order and taxation known as feudalism. We're going to talk about that on Monday. We're going to explain how the Roman infrastructure turned into the feudal system, and that the Romans didn't really leave per se. They just fell, right? So they established settlements throughout Europe as well. The Vikings did. A lot of misconceptions about the Vikings. They were apparently the cleanest culture in European history at the time. They washed all the time, but everybody sees them as smelly, long-haired weirdos. So they established settlements. They even discovered North America first, but they got ran out by the Native Americans, we believe. Leif Erikson was the guy who did that. Hingadurgan. So that's it. We're going to stop there, right? We're ending with the Vikings. And I hope you guys have a good rest of your weekend. I know this is a little late on a Sunday, but you know what? I got things to do too on Saturday, so apologize about that. But it's up in time. It's before noon. Speaking of what's coming at 1 o'clock, go Birds, baby. Yeah, St. Nick, we believe in you. Let's go. Nicky Foles is taking us to the promised land. I hope y'all have a great weekend. See y'all tomorrow.